And joining us now from Atlanta is Michael Tyler, Communications Director for the Biden-Harris re-election campaign. Michael, it's great to see you. Big day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, happy debate day.
Yeah, happy debate day. But let me start out with a new Washington Post poll of swing state voters showing that they trust Mr. Trump more than President Biden to handle threats to democracy. This is 38 to 29%. How do you deal with that?
Well, listen, I think you're going to see exactly how we handle it tonight on the debate stage, where Donald Trump is going to take the stage as a convicted felon who's convicted for the very same reason that he sat idly by on January 6th after he encouraged the violent mob to storm the Capitol in an attempt to overthrow a free and fair election, because he's willing to do anything so long as he can gain and hold on to power. That is what is going to be in front of the American people for them to see tonight. It's what this campaign is going to continue to relentlessly hammer home in the coming months. You talked about the ad out today. The people who know Donald Trump the best, who spent the most time with him, understand that after the 2020 election, this is a guy who snapped and is increasingly unhinged, who's now running a campaign based upon revenge, upon retribution. And so Donald Trump has not been in the limelight since he left after he lost the 2020 election. Tonight's going to be one of the first nights that the American people get to see Donald Trump, a mainstream audience gets to see Donald Trump perform. And they're going to reject what they see on the debate stage, just like they did in 2020. So that's what the American people will see tonight, and what we're excited to show to folks for the remainder of this campaign.
Now, how do you deal with all of the pre-messaging that Joe Biden, if he comes out strongly, as he did at the State of the Union, is pumped up? You know, all of that obviously false messaging about doping, even being on a sugar high from Mountain Dew, said one Missouri congressman.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's absurd, but this is exactly what the Trump team does, because they know they don't want the conversation to actually be about the issues. They know that on all the issues that matter most to the American people, Donald Trump comes out as a loser. They know that if the conversation is about Donald Trump's role in overturning Roe v. Wade and the extreme state-level abortion bans that continue to play out across the country, Donald Trump loses. They know if the conversation is about the failed economic approach that Donald Trump wants to return us to, where we do nothing but give tax breaks and give outs to large corporations and the super wealthy on the backs of the middle class, Donald Trump loses. They know if the conversation is about the threat that Donald Trump poses to our democracy, if they are able to hear, the American people are able to hear what he has been saying at the MAGA rallies about his promises to pardon the insurrectionists of January 6th, or his call for a bloodbath if he doesn't win the election, or his promise to rule as a dictator if he does win, that again, he loses on the debate stage. So they're going to continue to do all this nonsense going into the debate, and we expect more of it after the debate. But that conversation on the issues that matter most to the American people is what they're going to see on the debate stage tonight.
So obviously Donald Trump is going to bring up Hunter Biden and other emotional and tough issues for the president, just as trying to trigger him and to rattle him. The president's going to bring up the convictions, clearly. And are you also expecting that he would bring up some of those things that Donald Trump has said at rallies? Because he is primed to come out as the reasonable, assured, the performer, seasoned, you know, in a TV studio and acting presidential. You know, what do you deal with that?
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to expect to see the same Donald Trump who you see at the MAGA rallies, right? He's spent the vast majority of this campaign since he launched it screaming into an echo chamber of MAGA extremism. He knows that for one of the very first times he's going to be speaking to a mainstream audience. But again, the problem for Trump is that when he takes the stage, it's not going to be a matter of his demeanor. The problem is going to be everything that he is talking about on the debate stage. He's made it very clear that he intends to govern in a far more extreme manner than when he last held power. And so the things that the president is going to call Donald Trump to task for are that extremism, right? Donald Trump's plan to enact a national abortion ban with or without Congress in a second term, the failed economic approach he wants to return us to if he's able to regain power, and his pledge to rule as a dictator on day one. That's all stuff that Trump has said out on the stump to his base, but the president is going to make sure that the vast majority of the American people hear it tonight.
And Michael, can you clarify, because we don't have total clarity on this. Will the First Lady, will very close friends and advisors be there? I know there's no audience, but is there space in the room for, family and friends?
I don't have anything to read out for you there. What I can say is that the American people will absolutely see what they came to tune in for, which is a contrast between President Joe Biden, who wakes up every single day fighting relentlessly for the American people, and Donald Trump, who's going to take that debate stage fighting for himself. That's what the American people are going to tune in and see.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.